Let your verdict give us the answer.
Let's start with your childhood, sir. You grew up in Nagpur.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little more about your times in Nagpur, early education?
Yeah, well, Nagpur is a good small town, at least when I grew up there. And my father was a chartered accountant, but we come from a family of lawyers. My uncles were lawyers. Well, I mean, one of my closest friends in school, with whom we virtually grew up, his father was also a lawyer, who then went on to become the Advocate General of Maharashtra, Mr. Bobde. In fact, my friend is right now a sitting judge in Bombay.
Okay.
So, a lot of exposure to this, but it was a nice leisurely life, relatively leisurely. And things were very different. It was a small town, we used to walk to school. It was a nice missionary school. Completely different set of values in which we grew up. There was no TV till we passed school, although some of the big cities had it. So, perforce we got into the habit of reading and those kind of things. So, it was a very enjoyable childhood, and I feel somehow, I mean, my children were born in Delhi, grew up in Delhi, and there are a lot of advantages of growing up in a big city, the kind of exposure you get. But sometimes I also feel that there are some advantages of growing up in a small town which you don't have in a big town. In fact, sometimes there are too many distractions in a big city which you don't have. Like, for example, our holidays in Nagpur, where I remember when we passed our college, for example, three of us friends got into a car and went driving into the forests of that area, to the Western Ghats. Every time on a weekend, our idea of partying was getting into a jeep and driving off into some remote place. And of course, you would sneak your bottle of beer or your bottle of rum and go and have fun there on the weekend. But that made you very close to the environment. So, enjoyment meant going into some picturesque spot, and spending a night, going and staying somewhere where there is no toilet, where there is no facilities. You're in the forest, you're going in the morning, you're sleeping outside, stuff like that. So that added a lot of charm to life.
Is that behind your great passion for forests?
Forests were a way of life for us, and we sort of grew up. And the interesting thing is, my father was an avid shikari.
Okay.
And one of his friends and clients was a former minister, Mr. Vidyacharan Shukla. He used to run a shikar company, Alvan Cooper. So, and a lot of his friends were shikaris. And I remember as a little kid, I even got there's even a photograph of me sitting on the bonnet of a jeep next to the carcass of a tiger, whom these people had shot. But having said that, for some reason, by the time we were 14, 15, we gave up any kind of shikar. We had friends with whom once or twice we went hunting, but we had turned conservationists. And one of my friends, who was the biggest shikari of all of us, he owned a lot of guns. God bless him, he's no more, he died last year. Who was one of the biggest shikaris, Feroz Patel, and who owned a lot of weapons and stuff like that. In fact, turned a staunch conservationist, and he was a part of the WWF. And till he died, he used to sort of keep egging me on, and coming with projects saying we are doing this and we must do that and stuff like that.
So you started professional life as a chartered accountant. Take us a little bit through your experiences as a chartered accountant, your shift to law, and I've also heard a lot about your great interest in tax law.
When I was in 5th, 6th, 7th class, I wanted to be an engineer. But soon that idea fell off somewhere along the way when I started reading the Perry Mason novels. But in any case, by the time I grew up, I was pretty keen on chartered accountancy. And my father had a firm, so I joined chartered accountancy. And my father, being a chartered accountant, had virtually given up, even before he joined politics, had virtually given up all accounting work, which his partners used to look after, and he did taxation work, which brought him in very close contact with Mr. Palkhivala. And Mr. Palkhivala virtually was like a mentor even for him in his tax work. So we heard the name of Mr. Palkhivala from a very young age. And I remember meeting Mr. Palkhivala for the first time when I was 10 years old. He came to our house in Nagpur. My father had got him to Nagpur to argue some case. So, you were a part of that world. I remember meeting Ashok Sen when I was 16 years of age, who had come to Nagpur to argue a case where my father was instructing him in the High Court. So, I saw all this happening in front of me. So, you naturally become a part of it. And while doing chartered accountancy, I realized accountancy is very boring, and I enjoyed taxation thoroughly. And I sort of drifted towards tax, and then I realized if I have to do taxation, might as well do it as a lawyer. And the turning point in my career came where the die was cast. It was in 1975. I remember I had just passed BCom, and I had already finished 2 years of training as an article. And I was preparing for my CA Inter exam when one of my father's clients had a problem, some interpretational issue under the new set of provisions relating to the settlement commission. And I used to work that time under my father's partner in Nagpur, because my father was mostly in Delhi. And it was a very complex question, and he told me, he says, prepare a note. So I prepared a note, and my father came from Delhi for a visit, and then the meeting was called, and my father's partner took this note, which was meant for his eyes, and went and showed it to my father and said, this is the note. And my father read the note, and I was petrified. I was very scared of my father, and I was petrified that I'd be humiliated in front of everyone by saying, which idiot has made this note. He read it and he growled at his junior partner, saying, who has prepared this note? So to get rid of that, he says, pointed towards me. And my father said, very interesting. And he says, but the point which you raised, he says, I was in the committee which drafted this law, but we never looked at it this way. And there was some question about definition of case, and they meant it in a particular way, but the way I read it, it was different. And he says, what you're saying sounds plausible, but the stakes were very high. So he said, let us go and take Mr. Palkhivala's opinion on this. And as a reward for having made that note, I didn't get a fee, of course, I was still training, but I got an air ticket to go to Bombay, and a hotel room to stay, which was my first professional visit on my own steam. And we went to have a meeting with Mr. Palkhivala. When he read that note, and my father, of course, with great pride said, Harish is married. So he looked at me and smiled and said, and when are you joining the profession? That was it as far as I am concerned.
Okay. And where did you do your legal education?
I did my law from Nagpur.
Okay.
And then in 78 I moved, I was in and out of Nagpur, but I did my law from Nagpur, then I qualified. Then I joined Dadachandji and Company. So I used to partly intern with them in Delhi, partly do law in Nagpur. Fortunately, the college is not too keen on attendance, so one managed. And then 78, we finished our law, and then I moved to Delhi, full-time with Dadachandji and Company for 2 years. But I kept my degree back because my father still wanted me to continue as a chartered accountant. And then I some practical work to finish. So I finished that, and then 18, I formally qualified, although 78 we had finished. And then in 1980, I formally qualified and joined immediately. And Mr. Palkhivala then told me, you join Soli. So in fact, he spoke to Mr. Sorabji and Mrs. Sorabji and said, you must take this youngster. In the meanwhile, I had a great opportunity. In 78 December, when Mr. Palkhivala argued Minerva Mills, I was with Dadachandji and Company that time. So I was assigned by Mr. Dadachandji to assist Mr. Palkhivala. What an opportunity that was.
Tell us a little more about Mr. Palkhivala.
I've never seen a human being that tall. Forget the lawyer in him. I mean, as a lawyer, he was amazing. I've done so many cases with him. I've done tax cases with him. And the way he read a section, you went to him with a question, he read the section, and you said, I don't need your answer, you've already answered it. So that was his capacity of analysis, and his expression was marvelous. His skills, forensic skills, were amazing. His advocacy skills were amazing. I mean, I noticed, I was young then, I noticed one thing very interesting. When he was arguing Minerva Mills, he put a proposition of law and he'd get resistance from the judges. So he'd sort of get into his rhetoric and whip up the emotional side. He'd bring up, and Gokhale's infamous speech about the court being a let and a hindrance. He'd get everybody's adrenaline flowing, and he'd put the same point of law and bang on. It went in. So I said, wow, this is an amazing skill. I got to know him personally very well, because after 1980 I did a number of matters with him. The famous Loya Machines case, which he argued in 1983, we worked together. And then I saw the personal side of Mr. Palkhivala. And my wife, he was very fond of my wife. He visited our home. I mean, I was a young lawyer that time, but I invited him for dinner. He says, of course I'll come. So he came for dinner, and then when we were in Bombay, he called me over. And I must tell you what a man he was. We were appearing together in the income tax tribunal. I was appearing with him in a case for the Singhanias, Raymond Mills. And he passed a slip to me. And I said, yes, sir, that is fine. And the solicitor leaned over and said, what is it? I said, no, Nani wanted some book, and I told him it is here. The truth is, he had passed me a slip saying, will Meenakshi drink sherry? Or will she have something else? And I said, no, that is fine. I mean, he is arguing a case on a complex point, and he is worried about what drink he is going to offer my wife in the evening. That was the human being in him. And the first time we visited his house, so what an experience it was. We were sitting in he had a little terrace kind of a thing with a lot of greenery. And he told me, he says, I would have loved to call you for dinner, but I'm going out. So you must come for a drink. I said, okay. So we went and sat down there, and there was a bottle of Black Dog and a bottle of Black Label and a bottle of sherry kept. Then his servant came and kept some French cheese and biscuits. And 5 minutes later, Mr. Palkhivala came. He was in the shower, and he came and sat down next to us. And he would always pour the drink. So he picked up the bottle of Black Dog and said, Harish, I remember you're telling me you like smoky whiskies. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, this is a nice whiskey, try this. So he poured me, and he used to pour generous portions. He poured me a drink, he poured my wife a glass of sherry, poured himself a small whiskey, and he sat down. And he's talking to us, and he was an amazing conversationalist, full of stories, full of anecdotes. And he pulled the plates towards himself. So he's talking to us, and he's opened the cheese, he's opened the crackers, he's put the cheese on the cracker. And the next thing I know is the crackers here, next to my mouth. And there was a question of saying no to Nani. And I think between my wife and me, he fed us that whole platter of crackers and cheese. But that was the affection of the man. Then after that, many times we went to his house for dinner. And invariably, he'd seat you at the head of the table. He'd never sit at the head of the table. He'd seat you at the head of the table. He always served my wife himself. He always poured the drink. And when we left, he would come out, not only open his flat door, he would call for the elevator. He would come down with us. Once when I was staying at the Oberoi, he walked us to the Oberoi. Once or twice when I had a car, I'd call for the car, he would open the car door. And the third or fourth time when this happened, I was so overwhelmed. That, and we were getting into the car, and I virtually got tears in my eyes, and I said, sir, I can't even thank you. And my wife also, she was overwhelmed. And she said, sir, we don't even know what to say. So he pulled my cheek and said, you don't have to say anything to me. When I first saw your husband, at that time, he was this much above sea level. He's a very dear friend's son. He's like my own child. This was the man. And I've learned humility, lessons of what a human being should be. We can only aspire to be something like that.
So about your initial years at the Supreme Court, you worked at the chambers of Sori Sorabji. What do you think about the system of mentorship at the Supreme Court?
Soli always had juniors, and he was a marvelous senior. When I went first to interview, for an interview, in his Parsi Marathi, he told me, "Tel kadin mi tuja." I'll take, oil, sort of squeeze oil out of you. And I replied to him in Marathi, Kara saheb pushkar hai. Please go ahead, there's lots of oil to take out. He was true to his word. He worked you to the bone. But it was a glorious experience working with him. He was a friend. We shared a passion for jazz. And he was amazing. And he was always willing to hear that maybe he's thinking wrong. He was always willing to hear that maybe you had a good point. So he was not one of those intellectual czars who sort of put his juniors down. I mean, he was short-tempered. He could never, and even now, he can't suffer fools. But having said that, if he respected you, and he always had immense affection and respect for me, he was fantastic. I mean, there have been juniors who sort of left because they couldn't handle his pace and his and solely worked at a hard pace, worked at a fast pace. If he pushed you hard, he pushed himself hard. And it's always fantastic when you're training with somebody who pushes you hard, because that brings the best out of you. And conversations with him, I was telling you, always had to be staccato, very short on patience. So you have to, if you said, Soli, I have to tell you something. Yes. So you have to say 3 things. You have to say that in advance. So, okay, first, so you tell him this. Okay, second, oh, okay, third, okay, bye. That's the man. And it was a wonderful experience working with him. So, if I'm something today, I think it's in very large measure, if not entirely, because of what I learned at his chambers.
Reflecting back on these experiences, what do you think about the system of mentorship right now in the Supreme Court? Relationship between the senior bar and the junior bar?
I think it is pretty good. I think there are a lot of seniors who do take juniors. Mr. Venugopal takes them. I think Rajiv Dhawan takes them. And a lot of the seniors take juniors. And a lot of them, maybe we get perspective from our perch. I think most of them are pretty good to their juniors. So I think it's working pretty well with the top seniors. Beyond that, I really can't say.
So you became Solicitor General at an interesting period, privatization and a slew of other cases. Could you take us through that period?
See, I became Solicitor General in 1999 November, and quite a bit of the landscape had changed. And it was a very interesting experience working for 3 years. Being a chartered accountant and being therefore exposed to the commercial world, I had a natural advantage. And in fact, even Soli, many times when these kind of cases would come, would tell me, you deal with them, because basically he was a constitutional lawyer, human rights and stuff like that. He knew tax, he used to do a lot of tax work, But for me, valuation of shares was pretty easy. Soli had a mental block with figures, always does. So he always felt more comfortable, and he was very accommodating. He never had any real ego problems. He used to say, you deal with these cases. So I got a chance to do some of the real initial good work. The anti-dumping came, the first anti-dumping case in Supreme Court I argued. A lot of the background advice for the WTO negotiations, they used to come and run it by me, and used to guide them from time to time on how to deal with the WTO. A lot of the challenges to the WTO laws, Vandana Shiva and these people brought, I defended for the government. And then, of course, the first successful privatization, the Balco. And it was very interesting working with a minister like Arun Shourie. And Pradeep Baijal, I remember, was his secretary. And Arun Shourie is quite a technocrat himself, a man for detail, a man with an eye for figures. So while Soli argued the legal bits, I argued the commercial bits of that case, to satisfy the conscience of the court that there was no monkey business in the valuation and how it was done, what principles were followed, stuff. It was very interesting, and we had to sort of turn the Supreme Court around a little, from the court of the socialist era to the court of the liberalization era. And I think one of the most remarkable changes which the Supreme Court brought in the law was dealing with contract labor regulation. The earlier principle that if you abolished contract labor, all the workers automatically became workers. Flipping it on its head and saying, no, you can't do anything like that. If you abolished contract labor, so be it. The workers go home. So that sort of virtually paved the way for outsourcing. And that was a remarkable revolution in the law, and Supreme Court did that. And as Solicitor General, I argued the case for the public sector undertakings. So it is very interesting. Those 3 years, we did the initial work on the Competition Commission. Mr. Jaitley had set up a committee as law minister, and then the entire electricity reforms were sparked that time, and it was a very interesting coincidence how it happened. Of course, they were on the annual 1998 Act had already come. Madhya Pradesh board had huge dues to the coal companies. To the point coal companies said, we are not going to supply you coal. Mr. Vivek Tankhau, a very clever advocate general, he filed a petition on behalf of the Madhya Pradesh Electricity Board for a mandamus to the coal companies to supply coal. I was not there, but I am given to understand he quite theatrically had the power switched off when the case was being heard and told the judges, this is going to be the order of the day if you don't give me an interim order. And he got quite a dramatic order from Justice Bhavani Singh saying coal companies will not stop supplies on an undertaking by the electricity board, that they will pay as much as they can. We brought an appeal to the Supreme Court. Of course, Supreme Court was red-eyed when they saw the order and said, what is this nonsense? For the coal companies, I moved the matter. But at that time, Mr. Digvijay Singh was Chief Minister, and he came to the government and said, listen, for future I am willing to make arrangements, but when I get the electricity board, I am inheriting a huge baggage of liabilities. Now if you want me to pay the entire 5,000 crores of the past, I can't, because I don't have that kind of money. So why not we find some way that we sort of block the past, we find some solution for the past and find way forward for the future. The government then set up a committee under Mr. Montek Ahluwalia, and I joined that committee, although I was Solicitor General. It was headed by Mr. Ahluwalia. Jairam Ramesh was on the committee. And that committee for the first time came up with this report saying that very well, you securitize the past dues, and for the future you provide for bank guarantees and stuff. And that then paved the way for reform, because then the logical step was that actually you must unbundle. And after unbundling, and very interesting, in 2000 I visited Los Angeles, and that time Pacific Electric had filed for bankruptcy. So I met the lawyers who were dealing with that, and they explained what the problems they were facing and how the unbundling had happened and so on. So we came and we worked on that. And the World Bank then got into the act and said, well, we are willing to bankroll losses for a defined period of time if you promise us unbundling. And that's how the whole thing happened. And then we worked on this draft for quite some time. I worked on this draft, which ultimately then became the 2003 Electricity Act. Mr. Suresh Prabhu was that time minister, and he became a very good friend. And we did a lot of work together. He was also a chartered accountant.
Okay.
So we did a lot of work together, and he was one of the finest ministers I've seen. Very down to earth, very straightforward, very fine person.
You also do a lot of pro bono work, sir.
Yeah.
What drives you? What motivates you?
Pro bono work is very important, because a lot of the pro bono work which we do is actually the work which gives our court its identity. Every institution needs an identity. The Supreme Court of India today has a remarkable identity, because all the tremendous work it has done in the field of human rights, tremendous work it has done in the field of environment. And necessarily all this work is not economically rewarding. And you always have people who are going to be affected, the commercial interests who are going to be affected by this work always can afford good lawyers. Sometimes they equally need good lawyers on the other side to assist them with the counterpoint. And that is where the pro bono comes in. And Justice Verma was the one who pulled me into the forest matter, pulled me into the air pollution matter, and Justice Kirpal, and that's when I started doing pro bono work. And on a personal level, I find it immensely satisfying. You feel you've done something, you've given back in small measure what society has given you in such abundance.
So, on the one hand, you are amicus in a slew of cases, in a lot of cases. On the other hand, you represent a lot of corporate interests in India at the moment. As a lawyer, how do you balance these interests? What is the thought process?
I have broadly followed one rule. Anything to do with forests, you'll never see me appearing for any private client. You will very rarely see me appearing in environmental matters for commercial interests, unless I'm personally convinced that what they are saying is right. Beyond that, as lawyers, we represent all kinds of clients. So there is never, one has to see that there is a little divide, that things which you do as a cause, which you pursue as a passion, you don't keep commercial interests out of that. So that's important. But other than that, you have clients whom you represent in commercial matters and you function as any other lawyer. Yes, I do follow one principle, that we do realize that today lawyers are not in public gaze. And whether we like it or not, the media, people like you, put us in public gaze, and a lot of young lawyers would watch these and they sort of look up to you. So you owe it to them that don't do something which sounds like you profess one standard and you practice another standard. So there are some cases to which you say no. And there are so many cases to which one says no, even if a good fee is offered. Criminal cases, for example, I'm a little selective of very selective of what work I take. By and large, you avoid Prevention of Corruption Act cases where they are gross. You avoid certain cases of crime and criminality.
It's another topic a lot of advocates are very loath to talk about, which is stardom. In a way, you're recognized everywhere. Every court in India that you go to, you're recognized. Any law school in India, every law student recognizes your face. You're one of the highest paid lawyers in the world. How do you feel about stardom?
Very honestly uncomfortable. You enjoy it initially, but then you realize it casts a huge responsibility on you. I've seen the clips on Mr. Jethmalani which you put on your website, and see what happens. Mr. Jethmalani set out to set standards, and then he appeared for Manu Sharma, and then you saw the very media which built him up and had so much respect for him, went and attacked him relentlessly. So it's an uncomfortable situation to be in. It's happened to me in one case. Question was about this Pench Valley, and I personally felt that that road project had to be allowed to go through, and I knew that area. Pench, as a kid, it's part of our haunt. It's so close to Nagpur. I knew the Minister for Roads, Mr. Kamal Nath, who I've known for 40 years personally. 30 years plus, 35 years, 40 years almost, I've known him. My father was his political mentor, and so I thought best is, he says, why don't you come over, a cup of coffee, we'll resolve it. We sat over it and sorted it out, and I said, no, sorry, this we can do, this we can't do. And I said, fine, you move this application. And I told the court, I said, I met the minister and this is the suggestion, and we have to find a balance between development and environment. One TV channel picked it up and ran a whole story as though sort of I had a meeting with the minister and done something, hole and corner. So, all this becomes very, everything you do comes in public gaze, everything you do, you have to then be very careful, you have to watch where you go, what you do.
So another question which you, I think, uniquely poised to answer, as amicus of the forest bench, on the forest bench, and the role of the Supreme Court, judicial activism. Mr. Venugopal had recently written an article about constraining the role of the Supreme Court to very selective matters. What do you feel about the issue?
See, you cannot have any preconceived notions of what the court should limit itself to. It is also very much A, a function of the times, B, it is something which you learn by experience, not by mathematical reasoning. I do not agree that the Supreme Court has been over-activist. Has every order passed by the Supreme Court in every public interest litigation been correct? No. There have been examples where, in my view, the court has gone overboard. And one example I always give is where the court ordered how the proceedings in the House should be conducted. Was there provocation for that order? Yes, there was. There is grave provocation for today for any court to interfere in way some of the state assemblies are run. Did the court go overboard? Yes, maybe it crossed the line, because now you are getting onto institutional autonomy. How would you like if If the Parliament tomorrow said that, this important case is going on and let it be videographed in Supreme Court, because we want to make sure all the arguments of the government are properly appreciated, we won't bear it. So, I'm not saying every order is right, but broadly, I don't think our court has really done anything wrong. If the court had not relentlessly enforced the environment law, I don't think we would have had any environment left. As it is, we are in a bad shape today. The common allegation, is it the Supreme Court's job to enforce land laws? My answer is no, it is not. Why are they doing it? Because you are not doing it. It is the Supreme Court's duty to see that law is enforced. The writ of mandamus is for enforcing law. Can the Supreme Court be a mute spectator if there is a rampant corruption which is bringing a crash of the infrastructure of a city? I don't think it can be. So I don't think there's anything wrong in what Justice Agarwal did. He took bull by both the hands and he dealt with the problem. And possibly we needed a bit of a rap on our knuckles. What do you mean by saying he overdid it? I think it is a complete collapse of the planning process. It's a complete collapse of the land governance situation in Delhi, why we find this city is becoming a slum. What was one of the most beautiful cities in the country and in the world is becoming a slum. Now surely the Supreme Court can't be a mute spectator. So I don't agree with all this criticism of judicial activism and the court going beyond its bounds. Thank God the court has gone beyond its traditional bounds and tried to restore some accountability and some order in this country.
But do you agree, sir, that the court is overburdened with cases?
Of course it is. All courts in India are overburdened.
What steps do you think need to be taken at the Supreme Court level?
Supreme Court is overburdened because the quality of High Court's judgment. High Court's quality has suffered partly because when you're overburdened and overwhelmed with areas, then the quality of your work suffers. There is no quick fix to this problem. The fundamental problem is the lack of infrastructure. Let's be very clear about that. The number of judges per million is abysmally low. I think our average actual occupancy is about 7, 8. We are not willing to pay our judges more. Till you don't pay them more, you're not going to get better judges. For our government, justice delivery system and the criminal justice system is a very low economic priority. To me, that is a complete distortion of our constitution, because the most important feature of our constitution is rule of law. We are a republic because we are a rule of law. And you cannot have a rule of law unless you have enforcement of the law, and enforcement cannot be without the police and the courts. There has to be a dispute resolution system between citizens, which is your civil justice system. And these are the cornerstones of the rule of law. So to put them so low down in priority, and believe me, every time there is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 crore demand, the rumpus which you hear, and today in our country, 5,000, 6,000 crores is not a large amount. By God's kindness, we have reached that economic stage that if 10,000 crores has to be spent, let's spend it. But the way the bureaucracy and the civil system goes up in arms every time there's money to be given. I mean, if the Solicitor General assured the court that if 1,500 crores is needed for infrastructure, such a rumpus and all these news articles about the government chastising the law officers for making commitments. Why? Because he said something that he would give for the infrastructure. This only shows that we don't want the rule of law in India. And the political system doesn't want rule of law to prosper for their own reasons.
I guess a related question is the quality of legal service in the country. And recently the Bar Council of India has announced quite a few measures to, improve the quality of lawyering in the country. What further steps do you think?
Quality of lawyering in the country suffers at two levels. One is the rush of numbers. There's nothing you can do about that. B, second is the quality of legal education. What can you do about that? You have all sorts of law colleges and all sorts of universities. Unless you have the kind of powers which are available with the medical council, unless you have that kind of a power, and treat law as a serious profession and create those kind of regulatory systems, quality of legal education is not going to improve. The third is for training of lawyers. Take in corporate law. This nonsense you have about foreign firms not coming in. I mean, if they come in, what do you mean by saying foreign firm? They'll come in, it will be their name, it will be Indian lawyers who will be working. But they will learn the work and the culture of those firms which have worked for years and tens of years in those systems. They will bring quality to India. But you want to block them because of few big law firms. Monopoly will be disturbed. So unless all these distortions are taken away in the system, we are going to be with this problem.
So what about life outside the law? You mentioned you are a jazz aficionado.
Yeah,
you play the piano?
Sort of. I think I do, others may disagree.
And dog?
I love my dog.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I was a passionate dog person, and that's why I never got dogs, because I knew once I get them, I wouldn't stop. My wife broke it by, first we had a dog, then he died in '98. Then she got another small dog 4 years back, and then there was no stopping us.
Okay.
So I have my pair, which is my pair of Rottweilers.
Yeah.
Such beautiful animals, so loving and scary for others. But
what other passions, sir, if you could?
my passion is music, and I'm a total family person. So very private person. I spend time with my family. And summers, 2 months shut shop.
Okay.
And I'm in London. We have a lot of friends there. Summers in London are becoming a passion.
Okay. So something that I've very often heard spoken about you is that there is no one like Harish Salve when it comes to courtcraft or reading the bench. Is there something that you'd like to tell our young lawyers or law students who might be watching it?
See, we have to understand, you're selling an idea. When you're arguing a case, you're putting forth an idea to two human beings. So you have to be sensitive at every point of time of what they are hearing, not what you are saying. So you have to see what they are hearing. You have to see what they are thinking. You have to bring them around to your point of view. Never be dogmatic. Because if you turn dogmatic, you lose connectivity with the person who is hearing you. That person feels he only has his point of view. You have to convince somebody. If I am having a chat with you, and if I have to convince you to do something, I must bring you around to a common ground. If I talk down to you, you will hear what I have to say thank you very much and go and do exactly what you want. So if you feel that the judge must shut up and hear you, you ever push a judge into that situation, he will shut up and hear you and go and do exactly what he wants. And that's not what you want as a lawyer. So you have to draw them out and see what they are thinking, see what you are thinking, bring them around to your point of view as far as possible. Sometimes you realize that maybe you've got it wrong. So don't try and be intellectually dogmatic, and that's what this exercise is, that's what good advocacy is all about. That's what I learned from Mr. Palkhivala.
So just a few minutes on how you think technology has influenced your legal practice, adoption of certain kinds of technologies.
See, I've been a gizmo kid always, and I've been a passionate of computers. And just to tell you, we argued the Vodafone case for 3 weeks in Bombay. I did not, for myself, have a single scrap of paper. My entire brief, all the judgments, everything was on my Apple 17-inch, and my notes were on my iPad. And everything went so fast and so smooth and so easy. So I think technology, if we can adapt it for our legal work, legal research, notes, organizing stuff, presenting stuff, assisting judges to move ahead quickly, and saving paper, saving the forest, it all marries.
Thank you so much, sir. I guess a related question is the quality of legal service in the country, and recently the Bar Council of India has announced quite a few measures to, improve the quality of lawyering in the country. What further steps do you think?
Quality of lawyering in the country suffers at 2 levels. One is the rush of numbers. There's nothing you can do about that. B, second is the quality of legal education. What can you do about that? You have all sorts of law colleges and all sorts of universities. Unless you have the kind of powers which are available with the medical council, unless you have that kind of a power, and treat law as a serious profession and create those kind of regulatory systems, quality of legal education is not going to improve. The third is for training of lawyers. Take in corporate law. This nonsense you have about foreign firms not coming in. I mean, if they come in, what do you mean by saying foreign firm? They'll come in, it will be their name, it will be Indian lawyers who will be working. But they will learn the work and the culture of those firms which have worked for years and tens of years in those systems. They will bring quality to India. But you want to block them because of few big law firms. Monopoly will be disturbed. So unless all these distortions are taken away in the system, we are going to be with this problem.
So what about life outside the law? You mentioned you were a jazz aficionado.
Yeah,
you play the piano?
Sort of. I think I do, others may disagree.
And dog?
I love my dog.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I was a passionate dog person, and that's why I never got dogs, because I knew once I get them, I won't stop. My wife broke it by, first we had a dog, then he died in '98. Then she got another small dog 4 years back, and then there was no stopping us.
Okay.
So I have my pair, which is my pair of Rottweilers.
Yeah.
Such beautiful animals, so loving and scary for others. But
what other passions, sir, if you could?
my passion is music, and I'm a total family person. So very private person. I spend time with my family, and summers 2 months shut shop.
Okay.
And I'm in London. We have a lot of friends there. Summers in London are becoming a passion.
Okay. So something that I've very often heard spoken about you is that there is no one like Harish Salve when it comes to courtcraft or reading the bench. Is there something that you'd like to tell our young lawyers or law students who might be watching it?
See, we have to understand, you're selling an idea. When you're arguing a case, you're putting forth an idea to two human beings. So you have to be sensitive at every point of time of what they are hearing, not what you are saying. So you have to see what they are hearing, you have to see what they are thinking, you have to bring them around to your point of view. Never be dogmatic, because if you turn dogmatic, you lose connectivity with the person who is hearing you. That person feels he only has his point of view. You have to convince somebody. If I am having a chat with you and if I have to convince you to do something, I must bring you around to a common ground. If I talk down to you, you will hear what I have to say thank you very much and go and do exactly what you want. So if you feel that the judge must shut up and hear you, you ever push a judge into that situation, he will shut up and hear you and go and do exactly what he wants. And that's not what you want as a lawyer. So you have to draw them out and see what they are thinking, see what you are thinking, bring them around to your point of view as far as possible. Sometimes you realize that maybe you got it wrong. So don't try and be intellectually dogmatic, and that's what this exercise is, that's what good advocacy is all about. That's what I learned from Mr. Palkhivala.
So just a few minutes on how you think technology has influenced your legal practice, adoption of certain kinds of technologies.
See, I've been a gizmo kid always, and I've been a passionate of computers. And just to tell you, we argued the Vodafone case for 3 weeks in Bombay. I did not, for myself, have a single scrap of paper. My entire brief, all the judgments, everything was on my Apple 17-inch, and my notes were on my iPad. And everything went so fast and so smooth and so easy. So I think technology, if we can adapt it for our legal work, legal research, notes, organizing stuff, presenting stuff, assisting judges to move ahead quickly, and saving paper, saving the forests, it all marries.
Let your verdict give us the answer.